Welcome back. This is part two of our unit on retailing and wholesaling. In this video lecture, we're going to look at some of the recent trends in retailing and how this is changing the landscape for retailers. And then we're going to look at wholesaling, which is something separate than retailing, which means people who buy and then distribute to retailers, and some of the functions they provide in the marketing channel. So let's begin with looking at a roadmap. The first thing is we're going to look at, as I said before, what trends have shaped retailing over the past 2 decades. Some of the most obvious ones are the rise of digital and online shopping that have kind of changed how people buy things. And certainly during this pandemic, we see this even more often in terms of people relying, instead of going to stores and more contactless payment, more buying things online and having shipped to their home. It's certainly become, it was a trend well before the pandemic, but certainly something that's accelerated during the pandemic. Some other things about the nature of retailers, some things about more inequality as far as the wealth distribution in our society, and therefore high and low end retailers doing well, and then let's say middle of the road retailers not doing so well. The second thing we'll look at in respect to wholesalers is what channel functions they provide. They can provide things such as support on financing, advertising. They can provide distribution and some packaging and other things of that sort that can, are bigger than any individual, particularly small single store retailer might be able to handle. And then we're going to look a little bit at the different types of wholesalers in the same way that we look at the different groups of retailers that exist. So let's begin. So this is just a list, and we'll go each of these in more detail about 7 recent trends in retail development. There are new retail forms, which means that we don't simply have the traditional retailers of supermarkets and department stores and convenience stores, that people are finding new ways to approach, let's say, the end customer. The most obvious one is online, and we're seeing a shortening of the retail life cycles, which means that a store like Sears have been around for over 100 years, and you're seeing some of those older stores disappear, and what we're seeing is the rise and fall, really in something shorter than a decade, a rise and fall of different retail stores, things that were franchised, spread throughout the country, and then have almost in a blink of an eye disappeared. We have seen a slowed economy, even from the after the financial crisis and after the recovery of the economy and the asset markets. What we've seen is kind of a slow growth. People are saving more, so you see lower consumer spending, and therefore it's a little more tighter, fighting for a share of the consumer dollar. The growth of non-store retailing, which involves non-brick and mortar stores, Convergence, mega retailers such as Walmart, technology becoming a bigger aspect. Once again, it's related to online, but not just in the sense as a platform for selling, but also the platform for advertising and also gathering information on customers. The expansion internationally of certain retailers, and the reinvention of retail stores as locations, such as, in the sense that you just don't go to a store to buy something, you go to the store to hang out and to experience it and to use the technology or use the different products, and that's part of the full experience. Just kind of a more non-technological example of this is that down the road is kind of a farmer's market, and we have it's an operating farm, and they used to have retail, but they've added a bakery and a cafe, and people go there to hang out, and they sell arts and crafts and things of that sort. And it's really even not really targeted toward the local community as much as targeted to people who come up from downstate New York and go for like a weekend, and kind of the whole farm rural experience. And they seem to have carved out a niche for themselves in that area. So let's take a little closer look. So the first one is that retail stores are becoming communities and hangouts, which means what you'll see is things like cafes. And one great example of this, I think, is I forgot its new name. It used to be called Turco's in Yorktown Heights, where it's not just a grocery store. There's also a cafe, and there's, let's say, small bistro tables on the second floor, so people buy their food and they tend to eat it at the grocery store instead of, let's say, buy it, take it out, and bring it home. And you've also the idea of creating hangouts where you've created fan sites or communities online around different, let's say, retailers and products. And so what you've seen a lot is to make the stores more friendly. They're not just, in a sense, aisles with shelves and merchandise on them and a register kind of guarding the exit. What you see is that people transform the interior space to trial zones or to hangouts or lounges, or even some things like Valvoline oil change, where you have a lounge where there's a TV going on, and then there's complimentary snacks and things of that sort. All those are to make it more community friendly and to make it easier to access or give people a reason to go out beyond just, in a sense, acquiring the merchandise. So another big trend is that, is the internet, and this is, I mean, it's not a new trend anymore. I think the internet e-commerce has been well around for at least 20 years, probably a little bit longer, and that more people are likely to buy things online. And what you saw, I think, is some first adopters about 20 years ago, where people were comfortable going to a website like Amazon, maybe college students buying textbooks and having delivered. And then you've seen more comfort where existing, let's say, retail brands like Walmart, Wayfair, Overstock, basically created an online presence. So the point is that people didn't feel like they had to go to the store or their local store, and even retailers that they had no previous experience with, creating kind of a footprint online for buying. And so it started with people who were pretty tech savvy or internet savvy, using online shopping, and then of course the distribution of smartphones made it easier to pay for things through your phone bill. But what you're even seeing is older consumers, people who are in their 70s and 80s, maybe early boomers, who would maybe a little more reluctant to use online, or at least less trusting of putting, let's say, things like their credit card information, or et cetera, or passwords online, are now more likely to use it than they would in the past. And I think that is it is an opportunity for some retailers, and some have done better than others. And but strangely, some of the ones that have gone online are some of the least technological types of products. So you see a lot of like rustic products being sold online. And one of the great examples of a failure to create an online presence is Radio Shack, a company that specialized in electronics and digital equipment. And so you're seeing is a greater and greater share of shopping is happening in outside of physical stores. And you can see this in terms of seasonal shopping, such as, the holiday shopping around November, December. People don't go to stores as much, and even when they go to stores, they mostly go to window shop rather than to make purchases, and then they make the purchase online. And usually buy something online, and they use the store either as a showroom, or they use it as a pickup point so that they can ship things to the stores instead of shipping to individual addresses, and then have people pick things up at the store. And a lot of this is that, I think people have less time, people are working more, and they don't like the idea of the hassles of standing in line or crowds in mall. And while that was considered maybe an enjoyable misery of the experiences, like hanging out with people and talking and standing in line, or waiting for a new product to come out, or Black Friday sales, where in my lifetime I can remember people, as soon as they finish Thanksgiving dinner, going to stores and standing in line to be the first ones to get a deeply discounted new merchandise. People don't see that as an attractive thing anymore. They like the convenience of home, and I think partly for the speed of shipping, that it doesn't take a week, it takes more like a few days, sometimes same day shipping, that people basically, the gap between let's say buying it in a physical store and ordering it online has mostly disappeared. Most of the growth in these online sales, multi-channel retails, remember we talked about the different channels, ones that have a physical presence, an online presence, maybe direct from the manufacturers, catalogs, have been easier to have done better than ones that are strictly, let's say, physical retails and physical stores. The change in the speed of the economy is that what you've seen is that a growth in, let's say, discount and budget retail stores. So I've said this in many different video lectures. The largest growing part of the retail universe are the dollar stores, Dollar General, Family Dollar, and Dollar Tree. But what you're also seeing is in like discount grocers are doing better. So for example, an article I just read in on CNN Business kind of said that one of the winners of the pandemic was a discount grocery store called Aldi, which doesn't exist in our area, but you can be found in Dutchess County and Orange County. It is a cousin to a large chain of German supermarkets, and they've kind of expanded their model, and they've been able to increase the number of stores, but also, in a sense, be kind of like a 2/3 of a grocery store. And it's kind of counter to what you're seeing very often in grocery stores is they're coming super like super Stop and Shops, or ShopRite Pluses, extra large footprints in super large grocery stores, is that people are preferring to have these kind of larger than larger than, let's say, a pharmacy, but not as large maybe as a Chico's or as a Turco's, and they're finding kind of an important niche and generally focusing on non-perishable items, and focusing on own brand items, and they seem to be doing better. And a lot of that is because they're providing, you could say, more value for the dollar. Some of this is reflecting, I think, the wealth inequality in society, that people really do need to scrimp and save, and so people are more likely to do that. I think also that it's a disappearance of sales. Um, as things have gone online, people are more aware of what prices are being charged for different items. And what has happened is that there's less divergences in pricing, which means that you used to be able to know, like, well, you can get it cheaper at this store than that store. But what's happening is that everyone's going online, seeing what the price is being charged by others, and using that as kind of a focus point to set their own pricing. And as a result, you can't, in a sense, do as well by being kind of a smart shopper and knowing, what stores are likely to discount certain items, or what retailers are more trustworthy. And because you have the disappearance of like regular sales from these kind of middle of the road retailers, I think that the everyday low prices have done better. As I said, the middle of the road retailers are not doing so well. The luxury retailers are basically taking advantage of, let's say, the extra services they can provide to people who have more money, and will demand a certain level of service beyond just the core product and service itself. Um, So the growth of non-store retailing, as I said before, this is a lot of it's online retailing. And if you had to say there's one big trend, it's the ability to buy things online, or buy things to your phone, or link, let's say, instead of a bank account or credit card payment, link it through your cell phone bill, and making charges online and being charged that way. It's certainly growing faster than the traditional counterparts. Um, this is data from 2010 and 11, but online sales are growing about 11% year over year, even though the economy is overall down. A lot of this is just the increase in technology, the expansion of bandwidth, and just kind of, I think, the familiarity and the acceptability now to most people to purchase things online. Okay. The last thing is retail convergence, which means that you're seeing a merging of consumers' products and prices together, which means that um, everything is looking kind of like everything else. So let me take the example of Target and Walmart. Target and Walmart used to be very differentiated. Walmart went for low prices. Target went for higher quality. Now, if you go into a Target versus a Walmart, Walmart is kind of upping its quality, and Target is kind of lowering its prices. And so the point is that the greater competition has led to all the survivors looking kind of similar because they've adopted similar strategies. You see this in terms of just in the design of, let's say, shopping centers, that they all look the same. They all have this pink stone facing. They have the same kind of storefronts. There's not as much variation as you would have had in the past, and as a result, it's harder for people to differentiate themselves and position themselves vis-a-vis their competitors. The mega retailers have been a big part of this, and the retailers just Walmart and Sam's Club, the the ones that have supply chains, the ones that are most efficient, backed also by a lot of venture capital money, have been able to spread a lot quicker. So a lot of the retailers that used to be very common in this area, where the Kohl's on Route 6 used to be, they used to be Caldors. In the Boston area, there was something called Bradley's. These were in the top 10 largest retailers in the country. And they were both kind of like wiped out by first kind of a little bit by Kmart, but mostly by Walmart. And you even see Kmart disappear as well. And what you're seeing is that they're expanding, even though they're dominant, they're expanding their stores from Walmart going to super Walmarts and adding up grocery stores, and really one place shopping for all the items that you can buy. And the thing with the mega retailers is that they're so large that they're able to put pressure on manufacturers and demand, let's say, lower prices. You see this particularly with Walmart being able to say, look, if you don't set it at this price, um, then we're not going to put it on our shelves, and that would mean death when more and more people depend upon Walmart, and there's fewer mid-range retailers available. So the point is getting shut out of Walmart, it's effectively getting shut out of retail entirely. Um, you're seeing a lot more technology. This is not just in the sense of your phones, but you're seeing a lot more interaction, people being able to track their customers' phones with location data. You're seeing more scanners and customer loyalty cards and ways of tracking shopping patterns, and you're seeing more about people being able to buy things on their phone, curbside pickup and things of that sort. Self scanners at registers and things of that sort are becoming much more common. Retailers, not just, let's say, it used to be a relatively limited or localized event, and now I think you see these you see the same. You see it almost in every type of store, from hardware department stores to groceries, etc. And what you're seeing is fewer, let's say, chains, but ones with distinct positioning. So something like Trader Joe's, something like Aldi, something like Wegmans that provide a strong brand loyalty, but also kind of a unique style of business. Whole Foods would be another good example here. Is what they're being able to do is expand, and not just expand kind of in a regional fashion where, like, in the past, for example, Wegmans was an upstate New York grocery store. Stop and Shop was a New England grocery store. ShopRite was something that was mostly northern New Jersey and actually Orange County. And what you're seeing is that they are not just expanding regionally to their neighboring regions, which means they're not just going from upstate New York to downstate, or downstate New York into Pennsylvania. You're seeing them expand across the country. And as you're seeing, like, new suburbs and new exurbs being thrown up, you're seeing a whole kind of the same retail being put into every new shopping center. So things like Five Guys, which started out as Washington, D.C., Five Guys was like a one store in Adams Morgan. I remember it when it was just one restaurant and it was kind of a mom and pop business, and now it's become a chain. And you're seeing this a lot where they build a shopping center and the same 20 or so 20 or so stores pop up almost everywhere. Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, AT&T store, Verizon, Vitamin Shop, things of that sort. They basically, there's not any regional differentiation. Even in hardware stores, it's basically become dominant with Home Depot and Lowe's. I can remember where Pergament, you had an upstate New York something called Chase Pitkin, which was Wegmans kind of department store. And what you're seeing is basically two or three chains dominating the entire country in a way that wouldn't have happened in the past. It would have been more regional. What you're also seeing is the expansion of retailers, which means you're seeing European retailers such as Aldi, a German grocery store, kind of having a major footprint in the United States. You can see this also in terms of Japanese clothing retailers, something called Uniqlo or Unikuro, which was a Japanese, let's say, clothing store, very common in Japan, and now it has a presence in New York, etc. You can also find even Japanese bookstores. Kinokuniya, which was a large Tokyo bookstore, has a presence in Manhattan and had a store until recently in Rockland County. So the point about it is that you're seeing them expand into, like, all the global markets and taking whatever their model is and kind of, in a sense, cloning it and then just expanding. And their ability to do this is partially the financing system of venture capital picking winners and then putting a lot of money and allowing things to expand. Another one will be just like regional versus a national brand. Uber and Lyft being national brands pushing out local taxi companies. And I think the other thing is, mentioned before, communities, which means that there's online and physical communities, whether it's Apple users versus Android users, whether it's people, gamers around certain products, different platforms, whether Microsoft, Google, Apple, etc. You're seeing this in terms of, like, Starbucks coffee. You're seeing this in terms of Dunkin' Donuts, and kind of, in a sense, creating a lot of loyalty around a particular brand and creating experiences that people enjoy as ways of getting them to create a community in places that generally don't have a strong sense of community. People who live in suburbs, people who have to drive to work, where there's not, let's say, a defined, let's say, downtown or a shopping street inside the village. Um, so as I was saying before, the internet has led to most shoppers are more confident buying online. I think this is even outdated. As I said, some of this information is from the early 2010s. Here now in 2020, I think people feel more confident buying things online. And I think part of it is, it's not just that people trust the payment system. I think a lot of it is that people wanted to feel and touch their merchandise, because when they saw a picture on a web page, they didn't know how big is it, what's the quality, etc. And people feel more confident about navigating things like Amazon and being able to identify through ratings, high quality better quality merchandise, or that they're not going to have like shock when something arrives and it's nothing like it looks like the online the online presentation of the. Um, some other things that are happening is the technology. So you've seen this kind of like the scanner where you pre-checkout. So as you go through the store, you get this like handheld scanning gun. You check the barcodes, and it allows you to kind of track what you're buying and allow you to kind of look at the price and look at the budget as you're going. You've seen this in terms of people letting you know, pharmacies giving you a call when your prescription is ready, and sending it to a scanner. So basically more forms of interactive communication. Um, Examples of online communities: Fiskars, which was kind of a specialty scissor brand. Generally, scissors, you don't need to have them necessarily high quality, but for people who do this a lot, they're very particular. And what you've seen is that Fiskars is not just in the state into kind of quilting and home crafting and sewing and things of that sort. They kind of moved out into other types of cutting devices, so pruning shears, uh, you know, gardening equipment, anything like that, where kind of the reputation for quality. And so the idea, like people who like to quilt and people like to sew are also people who like to maintain gardens, and they've kind of, let's say, been able to kind of leverage their community beyond just scissors and crafting supplies. So as I said, their retail stores are creating these communities and hangouts in both the physical and also the virtual world. And part of this seems funny to me because, like, you think of something economic as something that's not community, because obviously there's an economic relationship. They're taking advantage of you, I guess, in one way, which means that they want to make a sale. They want you to buy their merchandise. It's an economic relationship. You don't really care. It's a lot. You're there to get it and nothing else. And so the idea that your community would be centered on what you buy and what you sell seems a little strange from the perspective of sociological theory, or from the perspective of like that communities are separate from economic relationships. And to answer the second question, are there things where it's undesirable to encourage patients to hang out? I mean, I think that if you get so one thing that happened with Whole Foods is that they would have these online discussions and forums, and the CEO of Whole Foods. So anyway, what would happen? A lot of people would criticize the company and criticize the politics of the company, and the CEO went under an assumed identity and started like defending himself, posing to be someone else. And I think what happens is that these online communities can take a life on their own, and they are not fully in control of the company, and therefore it can distort messaging, or it can lead to negative messaging that is undesirable for the company. So let's turn to wholesaling. So wholesaling are the activities involved in selling goods and services for resale or for business use. So you're selling to retailers who are going to resell it to consumers, or if you're selling business to business, usually raw materials. Sometimes I think wholesaling is very common in produce and vegetable markets. And the reason why wholesalers are there is not because, you need, in this day and age where you can look up things online, you need to have this intermediary, is that they can give specialized knowledge by focusing in broader than an individual retailer and see what trends are, and kind of, through their network, they can communicate information they're seeing in the broader market, but they can also provide things because of their size with financing or logistics or warehousing, and basically take that burden off individual local retailers who who might not be large enough to, let's say, provide those on their own. So Grainger would be one great example of this. Grainger is not Archer Daniel Midland's Grainger. These are very large companies. Businesses know about them, but what they're not brands that consumers know because you don't buy something directly from them. So Archer Daniels Midland is something that handles like things like grain and buying from large agribusiness and then kind of creating products that are then resold to grocery stores and or to hospitality and things of that sort. Grainger offers maintenance, repair, and operating, which means that they help you things for businesses such as maintaining machines or specialized machine tools or production devices or ventilation, things like that are some things that Grainger might offer, which the idea is that will make your life easier so you can focus on your actually end customers. So they add value by, in a sense, enhancing the operation of a marketing channel. So wholesalers can, in a sense, coordinate and also, let's say, finance advertising. So in a sense that they're selling and promoting the products above and beyond, let's say, what the retailers or the manufacturers want to do. They can kind of be shoppers for retailers, which means a retailer just might want to sell scissors. The wholesaler might be able to find scissors that fit a particular profile. So if you're a crafting company, you might need higher quality merchandise, but if you're a Dollar Tree or Family Dollar, you want scissors that can be sold profitably for $1. So what they're going to do is find an assortment of goods or things that meet your needs or products without you having to go and do that kind of research and do that mediation brokering yourself. Bulk breaking, which means they can buy things in large lots and therefore get discounts. So for example, from the manufacturer, instead of finding all the retailers, one wholesaler will buy, let's say, an entire run or production line. And then what they do is they break it into individual, let's say, deliveries to a variety of different retailers. So what they're doing is using their market power to get lower prices, but then in a sense, with the savings they have, they're taking on the function of making sure it gets to a variety of different retailers. Warehousing, holding the inventories, which means particularly in a time where just-in-time inventory has become very common, it allows them to do all the storage and transportation and getting things to where they need to be. And retailers just have to focus on their customers. Transportation, basically another part to this, making sure it gets to where you need. Most retailers don't have their own dedicated delivery lines. They can offer financing, which means they can give credit to their retailers. Very often with new retailers, they might not be able to have enough money to put all the inventory or merchandise out that they want, and therefore, if the wholesaler can extend financing, they might be able to, offer a wider variety of products, particularly those that they buy from the wholesaler. They can share risk, which means you see this particularly with publishers, which is that if items are damaged or if magazines are not sold, basically that the retailer is not on the hook for the cost of the magazines that are lost or stolen or not sold. The wholesaler will basically buy them back or take them back, and the loss is put onto the wholesaler instead of the retailer. And as I was saying before, they're sources of information, which means wholesalers talk to a lot of different people, and therefore they have a broader, let's say, net to gather information about changes that are happening in the market and among consumers. Management, pretty straightforward. Basically, they're providing providing collective services that are beyond the ability of individual, let's say, retailers, which means it could be providing accounting, it can provide help with store layouts, it can be inventory control systems, which create efficiencies, but the upfront fixed cost might be too high for an individual retailer to implement, and the wholesaler can just, in a sense, sell a fraction or a portion of the service to the individual retailer. So different types of wholesalers. The merchant wholesaler is basically that the wholesaler its own business, and the products that it's moving belong to it, which means it owns its own inventory. as opposed to just keeping the inventory and kind of connecting the manufacturer with the retailer in a sense that they're just kind of an intermediary, a broker, but they don't actually own the merchandise. Here they would buy the merchandise, and so they're responsible for making sure it gets sold and brought to the retailer. Otherwise, they're on for the cost of the merchandise. This is just kind of summarizing things that we've talked before about some of the functions provided by. So there's a variety of different types of wholesalers. The most common is the merchant wholesaler. This is someone who owns a wholesale business themselves. And the key thing here, and this is different from the other types of wholesalers, is they take title to the merchandise, which means they own the merchandise that they're transferring from. They buy it from the manufacturer, and then they resell it to the retailer. This is the largest category of wholesalers. This is about 50% of the of all wholesalers. And they can be divided into like two broad categories: full service wholesalers that provide the range of the market channel functions that we discussed previously, or they can be limited service, which means they provide some but not all of the market channel functions or market channel services described above. Let's talk about some more limited service wholesalers. Two large categories are brokers and agents. The key thing with brokers and agents is they do not take title to the goods. They never have any ownership. So if you think in terms of a real estate agent or as in terms of a stockbroker, you can kind of get an idea about how they're different from, let's say, some of the other types of wholesalers. So when a stockbroker never actually owns the stock that they are, in a sense, negotiating or the brokering. What they do is that if you have a stockbroker, you might say, look, I'd like to buy 100 shares of this stock. And so what they're going to do is then, using your money, they're going to go find someone who's selling and then purchase that at whatever price the market is at that time. And the same thing in reverse, if you're trying to sell 100 shares, they're going to go into the market. They never own these shares. You're not selling the shares to them. What they're doing is trying to find a buyer for the shares that you want to sell. So you have title to the shares of the stocks of the entire process. Same thing with a real estate agent. A real estate agent is not selling property. Very often, the real estate agent is not selling property that they own themselves. They're representing a buyer or seller in the process. So, for example, when they're showing you a house, they're not showing you a house that they own. Real estate agents can go show a whole variety of different properties. They don't generally own any of the properties that they're showing. What they might do, though, is that they represent the interest of the buyer, the seller, or in some cases, a real estate agent can represent both. But they're basically, in a sense, representing those interests in the transaction. They might be helping in terms of searching for the buyer, the other side of the transaction, whether it's the buyer or the seller. And they might be, let's say, someone who's bringing together different pieces to complete the transaction. Whether, for example, a new homeowner, you might need a contractor to do repairs, an inspector to provide, information about the house that might not be visible to an amateur home buyer. They might be linking to someone like a title insurance or a lawyer to complete the transaction. And therefore, instead of you searching for all these different pieces, they might, in a sense, bring those together for you. So other thing with brokers and agents, they tend to specialize in a particular product line or customer type. And therefore, they might have a brand in themselves that they're saying, like, this is the type of agent or broker that I am. I either have a greater or lesser fiduciary responsibility to you. I have a particular approach to this, and people might have a greater or lesser comfort level with different types of brokers and agents. So the difference between a broker and an agent is that a broker generally is tied to a particular transaction. You want to sell or buy a particular stock, and a broker kind of brings buyers and sellers together, while an agent represents either a buyer or a seller on a more permanent basis and might be legally enabled to make decisions or to make actions on the behalf of a manufacturer or a retailer. So most common are manufacturers agents, which means that the manufacturers hire these people as agents to go find retailers, and they might represent them in local offices or things of that sort. So you might have manufacturer sales branches, which means they might be an independent company. You can see this in terms of financial products or a bottling or beverage thing where, basically what they're doing is they're trying to find retailers who are willing to sell manufacturers' products, and they kind of operate maybe on a local level or a particular sales circuit. So once again, wholesalers have kind of the same mix of marketing strategies that you might find a retailer. You still have the 4 Ps of the marketing mix, what products and services they want to provide, what price level they're going to operate at. They might be, in a sense, like with real estate agents, you might only work in luxury properties, or you might work more with rental properties, or fix them up. There's one particular real estate agency that I learned to identify that if they are representing the seller, there's probably something wrong with the property. Either there's a legal lien on it, or it's a fix them up, and they specialize in those types of properties. It's not saying that they're shady in any way. It's just saying, like, you know that there's something with the property that might be more problematic than a typical property purchase, and they specialize in handling those types of situations, whether arranging financing or finding the type of people who might be willing or able to deal with those types of properties. They can decide what kinds of promotions and what type of areas or customers they're going to serve. Once again, as we've talked about before, you still have to segment and target different parts of the market. You need to differentiate yourself from your competition. And then the customers generally for a wholesaler are going to be retailers or other businesses, not the final end-use consumer. So once again, as I said, this is just kind of applying general concepts we learned before. They apply to wholesalers as well. So what are some trends in wholesaling that we've seen recently? One is that with digital technologies and computer tracking and things of the sort, wholesalers have to be a lot more efficient, particularly because the rise of just-in-time inventory, where people are not storing large, let's say, inventories locally anymore, that they're basically on demand. You buy it, you get it there, and so people are less tolerant because they're able to track their packages or track their products, and wholesalers have to provide at least the same level of service as what they can get from direct purchases from manufacturers. There are demands for lower prices. Part of this is because of the changing wealth structure in the United States. Part of this is because of the idea that wholesalers, their value added is that they have more market power because they're buying larger lots of merchandise than, let's say, an individual retailer. They might in a sense be not purchasing. They will be kind of like not terminate the way, but like phase out suppliers who are not either providing good value in terms of cost, in terms of the price they're providing it, or that they might not be producing the necessary quality to their customers. One thing you're seeing is, particularly with these big box and these warehouse club stores like BJ's and Costco's and Sam's Club, is that what used to be, maybe think of the wholesaler, where you walk into BJ's or Costco's or Sam's Clubs and it looks like you walked into a warehouse. Despite being retailers and they're directly the product, they are basically holding quantities, and they're basically taking the look of a wholesaler, and the idea that by cutting out the retailer, they're able to provide you with merchandise at lower prices by taking, let's say, a middleman out of the process. And so there's kind of a blurring between some of these large, and I think also you want to add to this, Amazon has become basically a wholesaler retailer. Like, they have all the different, they're keeping the inventory, they're warehousing the goods and services, but they're also, let's say, the retail front for a lot of their purchases. So that line is blurring in a way that it wouldn't before. Wholesalers are not as local and regional as they used to be. You would now see ones that are truly national, if not international in scope. So one ways that you're seeing is pharmaceutical wholesalers. McKesson is making more efficient by providing online resources. So rather than keep things in the pharmacy, they are, in a sense, picking lower cost generics. They might be providing easier way of tracking and deliveries, and, let's say, product control, particularly for pharmaceuticals, which the danger of them getting into the wrong hands has become more and more of a problem in recent